Hey everybody, it's Tuesday, March 21st. It's a rainy day here in Los Angeles, which is pretty rare. So I got a nice glass of coffee in front of me, and I thought it would be a good chance to do some Blender stuff for the first time in this stream. So like Photoshop, what we did last time, I have to say that, sorry, looking at the comments right away is always really funny. Like Photoshop last time, I've got to say that I don't know a ton of stuff. You know, I'm not an expert by any means, especially with Blender, because I only started doing Blender stuff like three or 4 months ago. I've done a lot of 3ds Max design for 3D design and stuff, so I have a background with it. But I only started learning Blender a few months ago. And so it's going to be fun to kind of go into that and show you what I've sort of learned in that 3 months. Because Blender and 3D programs and stuff like that have a pretty big learning curve to figuring out how to make a mask. Like if you didn't have this photogram model, this is not a model that I've modeled in Blender by hand. This is actually photogrammetry that I did of this face shell, this Spider-Man face shell. Hold it up the camera for you. You can see it's the same thing, but that's kind of like it's sort of like cheating, but at the same time, I sculpted this face shell by hand, and I'm a lot more capable with like sculpting by hand because it's easier to add and subtract, and I've got a lot more experience there. So I was able to sculpt this face shell by hand and then use photogrammetry to get it up into the computer. And you can use just like a 3D scanner. Like most cities have places that will do 3D scanning for you, so you can do larger models and stuff. But I just did this to give myself a base, a sort of base object to start modeling with. And so you can see this has all the texture and everything from that photogrammetry model. I put lines basically all over it, covering the entire surface, because that's what photogrammetry needs to create a really accurate model. But even with these lines, it still struggled in the areas between the lines. If I switch to a solid view without the texture, you can see that it's really bumpy and ripply, but it has the general shape, and you can even maybe see here. It's hard to get the light to show it really well. Yeah, you can kind of see it there. There are kind of like veins, almost like little surface bumps, ridges, where the lines are in the photogrammetry model. They line up perfectly because that's where it had the most reference and stuff. So in between that, it kind of lost it and created little valleys. But that's why I'm not actually going to use this mask. And also, if I go to object edit mode, if I hit tab, oh well, I've got to select the object and hit tab. Oh well, there it goes, it did it. You can see that this thing is crazy geometry. It's almost like organic geometry, because the computer needed to do that in order to, I'll select everything so you might be able to see it. There we go. The computer basically just assembled things as best as it could, given the information it was given about the face shell. And you can see the result of that is like, it's pretty close, but it's bumpy and ripply, and I actually did 3D print it. I printed, this is the file that we're looking at right now in Blender. I 3D printed into this tiny Spider-Man mask file. I'll get some more lights here. I printed into this tiny Spider-Man mask file, which is pretty funny. It'd actually be pretty cool to have a full Spider-Man maquette that was about this tall, and I could even do some dye sublimation to it, and dye sublimate a little miniature pattern, and you could actually sew it together and make a, you know, like maybe like a 20-inch tall Spider-Man maquette that could go with your face shell and your mask. And you know, you could even design the maquette's body with 3D printing, and just have screws in the joints that you twist and you know, loosen. Twisted just asked if we'll also be doing the ASM1 STL file, and yes, definitely. that is definitely going to happen, and we're only doing this one right now because I have a lot of people still waiting on ASM2 shells and stuff, and so I think the sooner I get this STL file right here working, the sooner those people get their shell, I'm going to be able to mass produce it easier. And so I'm doing that one first for that reason, and then I'm going to do the same photogrammetry approach on the ASM1 shell, because the ASM1 shell is actually basically identical to the MCU mask right now. I think some of the other people who have done MCU stuff are actually using the ASM1 shell kind of as a base, because it's got a really perfect kind of like big cheekbone and temple area, and then still kind of a rounded jaw. This one kind of doesn't have quite so much of the cheekbone protrusion, and it also has kind of like a bulge around the side of the head too, which isn't quite accurate to the MCU mask. So I think that ASM1 though is a good base. And then also the ASM1, that's actually this shell right here. You're not gonna be able to see a ton of detail on it because it's black and it's super glossy, but it's got smaller lens opening holes, and so they actually fit pretty well for the shape of the new MCU lens shape. So that's actually another reason, kind of all together, why we're doing this particular stream today, is that I want to kind of get into the design, because I've actually never designed a face shell like we're about to do here in Blender, but I've learned a couple things, and it's going to be fun to kind of tackle it live while you guys watch. But once I've done that, I'm going to do the same photogrammetry process to this shell, paint it flat and put all the lines and everything on it and do the photogrammetry. And then with that, I'm going to be able to do both the ASM1 and start work on the MCU. And when I'm doing the moving lens components, I've been designing a lot in Blender over the last couple weeks, working on some secret projects like this. Once again, black on black background. This project Chromatophore I've got going, that I've called it. That'll be a little more visible in 2 weeks or so. But I've been designing a lot of really intricate stuff, and it's just amazing what you can do when you're designing in a computer. And I've designed for a long time in Photoshop. And when I was designing dye sublimation suits, it was awesome designing in Photoshop, because it's like, oh, edit undo when I make a mistake. It's not the end of the world, you just undo it. And if something doesn't work, you delete it and you redo it. And that's what I've been doing with this other project I'm working on, and it's just so amazing. So I want to do the moving lens components and all of that in Blender in those different pieces, because then once I've got all of those different components designed in exactly the right shape and curvature and everything, and then even the shell with all of the mounting points and everything designed inside of it, boom, I can just start selling it. So that from Shapeways actually has a store in which, where if you have, say, a face shell file like this one I'm about to clean up here, you typically with Shapeways you would send them the STL file, and they would just you'd pay for it like the bare materials, and then they send it back. But what the Shapeways store is essentially, I put my STL file up there, and then you order it from Shapeways, and it just comes to you from Shapeways all assembled. So it's not a matter of me delivering it to you at all, essentially, except for lens components. I think I'd still have to potentially sell the lens component kits, just so you'd be able to assemble that yourself. But that'd be really, really simple compared to assembling entire shells by hand, which is what I've been forced to do for like the last several months now. And so yeah, I'm really excited, and that's the I'm juggling a lot of projects right now, and so I chose this one specifically because I think it moves a lot of different people's project, like the people waiting for face shells and stuff. They'll be able to get their stuff. Winter Boy asked, how much filament do you use printing a face shell? I don't know. I've never printed a full face shell, but I can almost guarantee it'll be under a single like kilogram reel. That's typically what 3D printing filament comes in, is a big spool of 1 kilogram. And I can almost guarantee that it'll be less than that for the entire shell, because I don't want it to be a big bulky thing. It's going to have a lot of air holes and kind of aspects to strengthen it. I even, since it's being designed like this, I'm even planning ways to do the moving jaw directly into the printing file. Hey Derek, thanks for tuning in. Thanks all of you guys for tuning in live. I appreciate it. I was a little late today. I got some new keyboard and mouse stuff that you can see above me here implemented into my stream. So now you can see when I'm what keys I'm doing, and it's not half the keyboard anymore. You can actually see when I press what buttons, which I think is helpful. There's a feature in Blender where down here in this bottom corner it will flash really fast what buttons are being pressed. I think that's a plugin inside of Blender, and there are so many great tutorials out there. Like, let me tell you that first. If you're interested in learning Blender more after this, there are way better tutorials that are way more concise. This is just kind of like an intro, get your feet wet type of thing while you watch me work on this project. But there are some really good Blender projects, and also there are so many tutorials out there that, like, no matter what you're making, if you're making you know, a spaceship, all you have to do is Google Blender spaceship tutorial or search YouTube for Blender spaceship tutorial, and you'll find hundreds. You'll find so many. Twisted asked, do I know when my file will be with Shapeways? No, I can't really give a great estimate right now because it could be really quick. All it is it could be a matter of, you know, as soon as I have the face shell file with all of the design, the mesh designed, I've already started the process of making the Shapeways store, and then the first thing you do is you have the product ordered for yourself from Shapeways, so that process has to go, I think, you know, so at least a couple weeks, you know, at least 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month, but, you know, I'm honestly really bad at estimating the future, you know, with my projects, if anyone knows me at all. So I have to start with that. Okay, so I want to kind of dive back into Blender here and what my plan is. Blender is really awesome. If you've never used 3D programs or anything like that, there are so many tutorials that will just be really nice and hold your hand and be like, this is how you make a block and this is how you make a cylinder. And we're going to do a little bit of that right now. But as you can see, it's a little more advanced because I just launched into a file already with this shell in it. One thing I want to do, I want to center this face shell on the center of the axes. The green line is the y-axis, the red line is the x-axis, and then the blue going up and down is the z-axis. And that's all given to you in this little cheat sheet down here in the corner. What I want to do is move it, I guess, a little over. I'll probably have to move it and rotate it. You can see that it's a little off in its shape. And there, you can press keys on the keyboard that will automatically bring you to different views. I just pressed 7 there, and it brought me to the top orthographic view. There is a difference, I'll say really quick, between orthographic and perspective. I just hit 5 right there, and I had to select a setting in the user preferences to get my numbers up above the keyboard and to do these quick settings, because usually it's your number pad, but you select settings in the preferences that lets you do that. But the difference between perspective and orthographic is that you can see that it looks all bugged out and weird, and that's because we're so close that things that are closer are you know, look larger, and so as you get further away it looks more orthographic. But you press 5 and that locks it to orthographic. It never does that perspective thing to you. So that's pretty important. And now you can see that it's kind of centered up here in the middle, and then it's off a little down here on the chin. And I decided early on, you know, my shell is not symmetrical because I sculpted it. So I had to sculpt one side, and then when I had that side finished, I had to sculpt the other. And then any time there was a little bit of a change that needed to be done, it had to be, you know, edited a little bit here, add a little bit here, and then add a little bit here, or take a little off here, take a little off here. So it was it's such a laborious thing. That's why I'm in love with designing on the computer and then 3D printing now. It's just there's so much more you can do. So I've basically decided that I like the right shape of my shell the most. I actually like the chin on the left better, but everything else, including the lens, I thought the lens looked better on the right as well. It was like a better kind of bugged out shape. So I just decided that that's really all I needed. I left this one off because it also gives me a lot of information about how that recessed area looks. I'm not going to put my magnet placements in that same spot again. I really, this one up here was basically a menace still. It kind of gets in the way of a seam or a web. You know, it's kind of just in the way. I was hoping it would be really good for pulling that corner down, which it does. It does pull it down pretty well, but certain things get in the way. Ultimately, I'd actually really like it if it was like the movie, where they have a clip in the bottom that goes down in here, like right in the bottom, and then like just a big rare earth magnet right up here. And because everything's 3D printed, there's no guesswork. Everything is just going to be so perfect and precise. Unless, you know, the lenses will still initially have to be vacuum formed, but I'm actually looking into having them manufactured out of like polycarbonate, like safety glass lenses are, and like paintball lenses are. So you'd actually be able to like use these, you know, face shells for paintball or like safety work, because polycarbonate is just so much stronger than PETG or acrylic, or there's a reason why polycarbonate is used for like safety glasses and safety shields and stuff. So you can actually have companies create stuff like that, and then, you know, if that was all I needed to get to people were those lenses, I could just buy bulk amounts of those lenses and have them made. And so, you know, it's interesting to have this detail stuff here, but I really don't need it because I'll be able to kind of carve all of that away once I do this top model. So anyway, back to what I'm doing here. I'm going to select this guy, which I already have, and then when you hit Shift S, that allows you to move your 3D cursor over here. And your 3D cursor basically dictates where new objects and things like that are going to form. So actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hit Shift C, because that just moves the camera out and looks at everything. You know, we have a camera up here that we don't need. I don't need to worry about like rendering or anything. So I'm deleting that. So when you hit Shift C, that moves your cursor to the middle, and it moves your camera view sort of centered on everything. And it also kind of resets your rotation a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is do Shift A, which gives you the add menu here, and I'm going to add a plane. And that's just a flat, paper thin, it has no three-dimensional, it's only two-dimensional shape. And the reason I'm doing this, I'm actually going to go to hit 1, or no, sorry, that's not the right view. Yeah, I'll need to rotate this actually, because I want, see, I'm on the right ortho right now, but I'm looking at the top of the shell. I don't want that. This is the front ortho, and I'm looking at the side. I'd rather this be the chin. So I'm going to go back up to the top view, and you just hit R. Actually, this guy has a really weird origin right now. So I'm going to reset his origin by going, I have the shell selected, and you go to set origin to geometry, and that moves that origin. So now it's not going to rotate in that crazy way it just was. It still might be a little crazy because it's not perfect geometry. You can see down in the bottom corner, like right by where my hand is, right here, I've got a little number of the actual degrees of rotation. But because it wasn't perfect anyway, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. And it'll be cleaned up a little bit here in a second. Okay, so now that's been rotated, and it's going to be moved back and forth a little bit here when it's being mirrored. But now I go back to that plane I had, and I'm just kind of doing this all in a very basic way. Hit rotate or R again, and it allows you to just rotate the object on that axis that you're viewing it from. And so I'm almost to 90 here, and you can see that it's hard to get an accurate number. If you hold Shift, oh, there we go. If you hold Shift when you are, well, let me undo that really quick. So rotate, and you can see it's going to go up to 90, or negative 90 because of the direction I went. That's basically the same thing. So it's negative 90.5. When you hold Shift, it allows you to have a lot more fine control. So I'm able to get down to perfectly 90. And there are better ways to do that. I don't even have my transform options open over here, but that could have been done right here, because I rotated it 90 degrees on its y-axis, and it's actually 0.0002, so I could just get rid of that, and it's even more precise. Okay, and so I'm going to move it up because it's centered kind of at the base, but I want it to be cutting the face shell in half for my purposes. And then it's weird. So now I'm going to see, you've got different transform options down here. Right now it's in the arrow mode, so I'm able to move it back and forth. But you hit the scale modifier, and then when you hit that, it only grows in that one direction. And then, it has no dimension in that direction. I was kind of just checking to make sure it didn't, but if it did, you would have transformed it. All right, so yeah, there we go. I made that a little longer. Go back down to this arrow key here, move it down. And so now what I'm doing is I have a reference of that plane of exactly what my middle line will be. So that lets me kind of move this back and forth. I'm gonna go back up to perfectly 7, although that makes my plane disappear. That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, see, I'm still super new to Blender, so I'm like, I put that plane there so that I'll be able to make sure, whatever, I'll just kind of change the angle slightly and eyeball it, because it's super, since I sculpted it by hand, it's really not the most symmetrical shape in the first place. And well, I mean, it's such a natural shape that is why it's difficult to just start and do the shell in the program from nothing, and basically from reference photos. Is that it's a very natural, a lot of natural curves, and there are, it's not just one consistent curve. There are a lot of flat areas and bulged out areas. It's kind of a crazy shape. But it's designed really well, so it looks like really streamlined once you've got a mask on top of it. So now what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that I've got a pretty good middle line here, and I've got the shell pretty well cut in half. I think I might want to move this back just over slightly. I think it might be cut in a little bit too much. And one way you can do that, go back to the top view. I'm going to move my 3D cursor by just left clicking here, and that moves your 3D cursor. That actually can be really frustrating when you just start out with Blender. You're trying to get the piece moved around, and or you're trying to select a piece and you just are moving your 3D cursor around. So it's always right mouse button to select things, and you can change your mode into like 3ds Max mode or Maya mode, I think, to have your controls be a little more consistent with other programs. Blender's a pretty nice and versatile program, but it also can be frustrating. But it's great for how, I mean, it's free, so how can you argue with that? So maybe the nose is just kind of off a little bit, or no, yeah, the whole thing just. Yeah, this is one of those moments of just judgment calls of like, so, I'm really just investigating here, like, and it also could just be that the shell itself needs to be rotated, or it could just be that my nose is a little off to the side. Yeah, that might be it. I apologize to those of you who have a face shell from me, because right now we're just kind of going through and nitpicking a bunch of little asymmetrical things, but I can guarantee you that it's not the kind of thing that people really pick up on. There's always going to be little micro flaws in projects, but it's always the macro. You want to pay attention to the bigger shapes and the bigger structures and stuff, and that's what really makes it look accurate and stuff. And then you start to solve the micro stuff once you've got that figured out, which is basically what this is, figuring out all of the little tiny stuff. Yeah, Chris just commented that he tried Blender a little while ago and was so confused. Yeah, I agree, because I modeled stuff several years ago in 3ds Max. I've always been a very self-taught person with programs like this, and I tried to do like some web shooters a couple of years ago for both of the last two movies. I tried to do web shooters in 3ds Max and then 3D print them, and the models look good, but I could just never figure out what it took to get a functional STL file and the non-manifold shapes and things like that. And really, it wasn't until I got a 3D printer 3 months ago. I basically just bought one without any knowledge in 3D printing and a very basic amount of knowledge with modeling. And I bought one, and it was like awesome. It was like a little crash course. So I definitely recommend to anyone that doesn't have a 3D printer, you can get one for $200 to $300 these days. Just shop around a little bit. I got mine. It's the Anet A8 printer from gearbest.com. So it comes from China, and it's kind of a pirated version of the iPruitt i3, I think, or the Pruitt i3. That's just something I read on a website for some of its specifications. But it's really awesome. It's it's cheap, and you have to assemble the whole thing yourself, and you learn so much in the process of doing that it really is like a worthwhile investment. Okay, so I'm gonna get back to this so I can actually, because I wanna actually get some progress done here and get this thing done. So I actually think I need to maybe. Oh yeah, it's just that this chin area, the whole chin area kind of goes off to the side, but that's okay because I'm making an entirely new mesh right now. I'm just using this other one, this older one, as a base, and then making a new one. So I'd say that's good enough for being cut in half. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift S, and that moves my cursor to selected, my 3D cursor, that really annoying thing when you first start out. But that moves that to selected, so now anything I create will be right on that Y plane. And what I'm going to want to create, I'm going to start from the top view here, and actually, you know what I want to do even more so, because I want my top view to be the mask looking directly at me, like flat, totally flat looking at me, just for the sake of structuring the geometry. So I'm going to go to the side view again here, and yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and rotate this guy so that pretty much it's more like an actual Spider-Man looking at you. It's a little too high. That's probably a little better. Yeah. So let me turn my material on. See, these are your different material options. We can do wireframe, but this is such a crazy mesh that it really creates that's like a crazy intro to some animated Spider-Man cartoon. Okay, so go back to texture here. And it'll take a second because there's just so many faces and stuff. So yeah, got a pretty good view here of it. Oh yeah, I guess I should have been looking at that texture, because I did go through and draw a center line on it. You can tell that it does kind of angle over. It kind of makes it to the middle and then pivots on either side. So it is kind of difficult to account for that. So I guess I'll just cut off a little bit on the top and on the bottom, and then refine the shape afterwards. So that looks, I'm going to move the nose just slightly down more. Like that. Even more. Yeah, see, because I drew these blue lines by hand to try to kind of give myself a reference of what is flat for the mask. Same with these orange lines. And you can see that I had to kind of wrap them around the shape of the shell in order to get them to actually do that flat shape. But it's pretty successfully gave that information to me, because that's actually, these lines that I've drawn all over this shell are essentially what I'm going to try to shoot for the shape of my mesh, except that the top of the shell will be the top of a sphere to get a really good smooth shape. Jetty just asked, why don't I do the face shell of the Homecoming lenses and etc. I'm going to do that in the next week or two. part of it is like, I'm sure all of you guys have noticed by now, but there are a lot of awesome MCU suits out there. Brayan has one right now. He modified it looks like a sort of modified ASM1 pattern and shell to get his MCU suit, and it looks great. And then there's that guy, the Hong Kong guy that has his moving lenses, and then there's Robot Ninja who has his moving lenses. So, you know, for me, it's like, I don't know, it's like the fun for me is kind of like pushing the bar and stuff, and a lot of times like I still definitely want to make my moving lenses and stuff, but it's like everyone's kind of really knocking it out of the park. Like the suit quality out there right now is like as good as the movies, if not better. Like I think the most recent movie suit was actually kind of sloppy. Like a lot of the seams are just kind of all over because they know that there was going to be a lot of digital editing to the pattern, and so you know they weren't too worried about that. Anyway, so yeah, I'm definitely going to do that, but I'm just going to be, you know, stepping through it because the stream right now for all this Spider-Man related stuff, I'm just excited to get you know the information out there, especially with the Spider-Man stuff, because I've got, you know, the project Chromatophore. If you've seen like my posts on Facebook or Instagram, that should have a pretty large prototype done in the next week or two, and I'm really excited about that one. That's kind of like my next big thing, I think, and that's why a big reason why I'm doing these streams and kind of building my social media presence is I know that like this is kind of my next big thing, and if I don't have this structure of a social media thing, like a presence, then, you know, there's not as much to kind of look at and view. Like my YouTube channel, if those of you who are familiar before these streams started, my YouTube channel was just very barren, and like I had 25 videos in my entire 10-year time being on YouTube, and just in the last, you know, less than a month, I've done 10 of these live streams and gotten like 30,000 minutes of watch time. So it's really crazy. Like I love this stream so much. So I'm just, you know, we'll get to those MCU stuff, but it's just like no rush in my mind. I'm not really concerned with the like kind of competitive aspect that some people typically, and me, you know, me included, I've gotten into the competitive, you know, I've got to have the suit done first sort of mindset. But you know, that kind of, it's already been done and stuff. So I do not have as much of a rushing kind of mindset with it, but I do need to get these ASM2 shells done. There are a lot of people out there that are still waiting for you know, getting their shells and stuff, and I think this is a really viable way to do that, because once I've got this file done, it's just a matter of getting it 3D printed and getting it out to everyone. So moving forward with it, I've got kind of my middle ground, and I've rotated it so now oh whoops, wrong button. It's always confusing to me. I always get confused with the buttons between like Photoshop and Blender, and Agisoft is another control scheme. So I've already got that, and I accidentally just moved my 3D cursor, so I'm going to move the 3D cursor back to that plane, Shift S, cursor to selected, or I could do center. And you can actually move the cursor in this transform menu, and that can be helpful. Like right now, the next thing I'm going to do is start a sphere up here that will be the top of the head, and I don't need to move the 3D cursor, I'll just do that. So I'm going to go ahead and start a mesh and a UV sphere, and I need it to rotate eventually, but first I want to make sure it has the proper amount of segments and everything. You see it looks very much like a disco ball, and that's kind of what your file is going to look like, and then you add a bunch of modifiers to the file, and it adds subdivisions to the mesh, and then it also smooths the mesh, and that's how you kind of get a really nice clean shape with just kind of a very basic minimal design. And that's been a lot of what I've been learning in Blender the last few months, is because being self-taught, I would always make really complex shapes and just Boolean them together. Basically the Boolean tool is the only thing I'd ever use, and that creates such really complex models that have non-manifold shapes, which are what really throw off the 3D printer when they're saved into an STL file. So it's really been a matter of learning things from the foundation. And so you start your file from like a sphere or something like this, and I need to make sure that I have enough segments so that I can continue downward, because we're only going to use half of this sphere as the top of the shell, and then we'll extrude the segments downward to create the rest. That probably is good. I'll just go ahead and do like 48. I'll try 48. That might be too many. Yeah, that's too many. Wait. Actually, yeah, I'll go back to what I had last time. I think that was 32. If you pick some random number, then it's going to give you a random number of sides, but those are two good numbers. Okay, so now that I've gotten that done, I need to rotate it 90 degrees and then kind of scale it. You have to select your segments and your rings and everything. Actually, I'm going to add some more rings. I'm going to do like 24. You have to do this first. You have to select your segments and rings first, because once you do any rotation or transformation to the object, you lose your ability to do that in Blender, to adjust the segments and the rings and stuff. And I'm not sure, I don't remember if that was the thing in 3ds Max, but I don't remember, I don't think it was. And that was one of my biggest problems with Blender when I started using it, was that you only have that one shot to edit those segments and rings, and then otherwise you have to just create a new shape if you want to make more segments or rings. Okay, so I just rotated that 90 degrees. So now when we look at it from the top, which is now the front essentially, I could also rotate the whole thing so that the top is actually the top of the mask. That might make more sense, because a lot of what this is just going from front to side to top. Oh, that's not top. Yeah, I think I might do that just because, and I'm going to get out of texture so that it's easier to see. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and undo that last movement I just did. Oh, too far. And then I'm going to go ahead and rotate this guy 90. Oops, accidentally clicked. I do that a lot. Okay, so if I move that forward, you can see I'm basically, that diameter of that circle is pretty perfect towards what I'm going to be doing with it here in just a moment. And so, yeah, I'm actually going to go ahead and just start by getting it up there. Okay, so basically, this is something I've needed to do for a while since I photogrammed the face shell. I've started the work. Looks like Spider-Man with a sweet Bob Ross hairdo here. Here, that's funny. Or one of those troops from Spaceballs. There you go, that's funny. Afro Spider-Man coming to a 3D printer near you. Okay, get rid of that. And so now that I've got all that set up, what I can do, I don't need the middle plane really anymore. So for now, I'll just go ahead and hide it because, ooh, I guess I just moved it. Yeah, I'll just hide it since I don't need to really get rid of it. So what I'm going to do next is prep this sphere for some of the editing I'm going to do to it. So I'm going to get rid of the Spider-Man model for a second. Just click that little eyeball and it makes it go away. And you go ahead and hit Tab. Tab switches you between, you have to select the object first. Tab will switch you between object mode and edit mode. And edit mode allows you to select vertices and just generally edit a shape in a lot more detail than you can in object mode. And so you select A will select a whole everything or unselect everything. And right now I'm in solid mode and I want to select this entire half of this circle just because I'm going to add a mirror modifier. So anything I do to the right half of this space shell, it's going to do exactly to the left as well. And so what I want to do is go ahead and select all of these vertices. Because it's in solid mode though, it's going to only select the vertices on top of the circle. It's not going to select through, so you'd need to select this little option down here that will allow it to pass through and select everything. And if you want to select a large area, you hit B, and that starts box select. You can see I've got the marching ants of like where that selection will start, and that helps you line up just outside of a row of vertices. And you just make your box selection here. And as you can see, I've selected that entire half of that sphere that we don't need anymore. So hit delete, just delete the vertices, and now it's just one half of that sphere. And I'm going to go ahead and bring Spider-Man back into view really quick. My plan is to delete below this middle line of vertices as well. Really quick, Kyle just asked, he has this ASM1 sunglasses and he wants to do the ASM1 shell. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be through Shapeways. I want to just have like a selection of different shells and lenses. And then, well, you'll be able to get the shells and the frames off of Shapeways. And then you'll have to get like the lenses, either make them yourself or I'll sell a little lens kit and then you'll be able to do that. But if you have your own sunglass lenses, then you'll be able to just do them yourself. Okay, and so like I was saying, I want to get rid of the bottom half of that sphere now. So hit 3, so that, well, anytime now, there we go, so that you're looking directly at the side. And then B again for box select, and that selects all inside of selection. Another really helpful type of selection, you hit C, and that is like a paintbrush select. If you look at my cursor, it's got a circle around it, and if I move on my scroll wheel, it changes the size. And what that allows me to do is select like a paintbrush of selection, which can be really helpful when you're trying to make a specific shape or alter specific segments. And then even more specifically, because it doesn't go away once you're done selecting, it'll allow you to continue to click and continue select. If you hit the middle mouse wheel and hold it like a button, it allows you to unselect in the same way that it selects things. And so it's just a matter of you hit the left mouse button to select and then middle mouse wheel to unselect. So that's a really, really crazy tool. And then you just right click to end the selection process. And so I've already got the half sphere that I need here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit delete. And eventually that'll register, maybe. Is my keyboard dead? Yeah, I'm dealing with a wireless keyboard here, and I'm a little far away from my receiver, so there we go. that can be pretty frustrating, is when you think the program is messing up, but really your wireless keyboard is just on the fritz. Okay, so left with a quarter of a sphere here, which is perfect for the starting point. And this is all actually very similar to a tutorial I've been referencing just a couple of weeks ago, which was a really awesome Darth Vader helmet tutorial. They basically started modeling Darth Vader's helmet exactly like this. And that tutorial was awesome because Darth Vader has got a lot of like intricate geometry and a thickness to the actual material, and so that was really helpful to watch that, to learn all the different little things. Roblox asked, McLean, how'd you learn to do all this? A lot of it is just, like what you guys are doing right now. I've watched people in the past. There are a lot of really excellent people who are really free with information and stuff. So I'm happy to finally kind of be doing the same thing and contributing, because I mean we all learn, you know, from different sources and compile a, you know, our own kind of unique pool of knowledge, and that can kind of be something that you want to keep like a trade secret, because you can have certain insights and stuff, but at the same time it's just more helpful to get the knowledge out there and get people you know, doing their own stuff. So back to this, I'm gonna go ahead and hide the shell again. So I'm gonna set this up for the mirror modifier, and what that will do is it will make it so that anything I do to the right half of this sphere will be translated onto the left half. So I'm going to go to this modifier menu. I'm already in it over here, but this is over here is kind of like where you're going to see a lot of your options. Like if you wanted to get your file scaled correctly to like inches or millimeters, you go over to units here and you see unit presets like centimeters, feet, inches. I still don't totally get that. I've set it to inches in the past because that's my preferred unit type. And when I transfer it to Cura, it seems like it has a lot of trouble transferring that scale, but it still manages to do it. It's weird, but I still have a lot of trouble with it. That's funny. Thanks for tuning in, FlubDub and Roblox. I appreciate the viewership, the viewership loyalty, and all of you guys. I just think it's funny that they comment every now and then on that stuff. Okay, so back to the modifiers, and that's this wrench button right up here. And again, I'm using Blender because it's free. You could go download Blender right now. You could go to blender.com and start downloading right now and start designing this stuff. And then if you don't have a 3D printer, you can send it to companies like Shapeways, and they'll 3D print just for the price of the materials, essentially. So anyway, that's why we're doing Blender. Sorry, I just had that thought that if you want to do this at home, you should do that. Anyway, back to the modifier. This is the modifier tab with the little wrench, and you go to add modifier and you get this entire list of things. And I mean, I don't even know what 95% of it does. I've only kind of dealt with the very specific stuff of like armor making and kind of solid armor type stuff. So basically like a key thing for that is the mirror modifier right here. And when you select the mirror modifier, you can see right away that it created that that shell, and you can change the axis that it modifies on. So like right now it's going on the Z axis and the X axis. So you could have two X axes at once. You could even have the Y as well if you wanted to get something that was that symmetrical on all of those different sides. But right now, and I'm gonna move it away from the middle line a little bit there. Well, I don't know why typically when you do that, it just sticks on the axis there. See, this is me being new to Blender. And that's why, you know, I won't call this like a tutorial, because I myself hate it when people do tutorials and they don't know like a program or a technique well enough. So this is just kind of like, this is like what it's like to just kind of get your feet wet with Blender. Derek just asked if we will be able to purchase the STL files and then also like separately from the Blender stuff. Yeah, I think so. I'm just gonna have to figure out like what are fair prices and stuff, because the other thing about the STL files, and you know, I've decided that I don't care about, you know, scammers and people that knock off my designs and my patterns and stuff, because I think if I don't care about that and I just really get it out there and I have this stream that helps people put it together and stuff, then they're not even really going to be able to do anything with it, because it'll be so obviously my designs that you'd really have to like, I mean, you'd have to alter my stuff so much that you just might as well be building your own stuff. And so that's kind of my only hesitation with the giving out the STL file, is that then people can kind of just sell the STL file themselves. But you know what? I don't care. It's the same as my print files. I've got some really cool stuff coming up in the future, so I kind of I'm kind of tossing some of the Spider-Man stuff to the wind in a way. Okay, undo some of that stuff I just did. Even that. Okay, so I'm going to bring this this plane back up here, because that'll help me here, because that plane is definitely on the y-axis exactly. So what you can do when you're doing your mirror modification is you can select something like the plane that you know. Oh, that was weird. But see, there we go. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for it to slide apart like that. I'm not sure why it wasn't doing that without it being locked on the plane. But then when you select clipping, anything that comes together locks together, or not. Yeah, this is being weird. Typically, it's not like this. I guess that's all I can say. But whatever, it's getting the job done, I think. And then, you know, you might think, okay, well, I better apply the modifier now. Well, it seems like most people who are, you know, capable in these programs just leave the modifier until they're done. And you can always turn it off and see just 1/2. And the advantage of what we've just done there is I'm going to bring back the Spider-Man shell, and I'm going to start shaping it into a Spider-Man face shell shape. So the back of the head, like the top of the back of the head, is kind of off a little bit. So I go into my edit mode, which is just tab, and as you can see, it doesn't even show this other half. It doesn't, you know, there aren't vertices to edit over there. It's just a projection of what you're doing over here mirrored in half. And so what I want to do is basically just start editing this thing in such a way that, you know, you're just generally, you know, changing the shapes so that you're meeting the shape of your face shell or whatever it is you're matching, because a lot of times you won't have a 3D object like this underneath to base it off of. You'll have reference images that will be on the background. Like if this was a more standard Blender tutorial, I'd have a reference image of a Spider-Man mask like that I'd have in the background that, you know, would be what I would use for that information. But this is, you know, I've lucked out because I've got a 3-dimensional representation of something that I spent months and months sculpting, so it's going to be really easy for me to just kind of edit it like that. So you can switch between a couple different things in object mode. You can select individual vertices, you can select lines, and you can select individual faces. And that's, you know, it's pretty important that you know how to switch between all of those. I'm going to want to move this face out so that the entire shape of the sphere kind of, you know, matches the shape of the face shell. But as you can see, it's kind of, you know, it only pokes out that one selected thing. And so otherwise you have to kind of, you know, I don't know, select a bunch of them and move a bunch of them at a time and then really like adjust them if you didn't know how to do proportional editing, which was something that took me forever. I knew how to do proportional editing in 3ds Max, but I didn't know how to do it in Blender, and it was driving me nuts because I didn't know exactly what to search for. Proportional editing, I didn't know the name of that, and so I was just like, how do you edit points in Blender and edit the points around a point you're editing in Blender? And so the answer to that is proportional editing. You hit O, and that turns on proportional editing. And so now whenever I move, oh, hold on. See, okay, so yeah, you see this circle? Proportional editing is on now, and now this circle represents the strength of how much it affects the points around it. It doesn't have any points within that small range, but once I start to change that circle to like big, now I'm affecting the entire shape of the circle. Look how perfect that is. That just basically almost gets the entire shape of the face shell. Boom. I mean, like, doesn't get much easier than that. And then it's just a matter of doing it more and editing frequently how the strength of the proportionality. And as you can see, like, I'm just kind of trying to, you know, it looks like kind of like an island with oceans and stuff, and that's because I want it to be that way. The sphere underneath is the water level, and the old model is the islands. You know, it's the bumpy, unproportional stuff, but that's how I know that I'm kind of skimming right on top of that old model. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this middle bar, and I'm just going to go ahead and try to get the entire side shape. It's such a weird shape. But what I'm doing here equates to probably weeks of sculpting. It's crazy. I mean, what you can do. And then to be able to do this and then to just quickly and easily be able to edit it is really just something else. And so essentially I'm just doing this game where I'm just going around and once again the scroll wheel while you're doing the editing is what's getting the proportional strength to kind of boost up a little bit. So you can see on the left side, so it might have a little bit too much of a bulge up there, or not enough, I don't know. It's really just a matter of playing with it. If your proportional editing is all mixed up, it might be that it's really, really large when you're moving and you've got proportional editing enabled. If you look on this little bar of black numbers and text right here, at the very end it shows a 0.42 for proportional size, and as I edit it changes that number. So if you can't find your proportional editing tool, look at that number, because it might be like 5,000 or something and you're just scrolling in the wrong direction and making it bigger. Not that I've ever done that. I mean, I don't know what kind of novice to 3D programs would do something like that. Not me. Okay, so kind of just shaping out that that shell, and it's really going to be just a matter of going in over and over, you know, and editing these shapes, kind of getting them. So now I've just moved to proportional points. I was moving bars earlier because that was pretty convenient for editing stuff, but now I'm actually moving points themselves. And I'll wait to mention that. There's kind of an indent right here, like a pretty strange curve down, and the reason for that is that when you're doing a face shell, you don't want the edges of your face shell to kind of stick out, just kind of sticks straight flat out, because the spandex will be tight over the face shell and then make a hard edge over where the face shell ends. And so if you have kind of like a rounded edge, the spandex is able to kind of stretch out and then kind of stretch across that where the face shell ends, rather than creating a harsh line. Okie dokie. Yeah, I'm just kind of moving that back and forth. Alright, it's really helpful looking over here at this other side, because it gives me a more generalized idea of the shape of it. Wow. Either that's just not centered at all. I think that might be the case. I think I might need to move my face shell over. But, or it might be that I need to move the points over or something. But yeah, I think it might not be centered. But yeah, it's crazy how non-symmetrical my model is, basically, or my face shell that I've made already. Yeah, what that probably means is that I need to move my model around a little bit and get it more centered into the shape that I've got, and then anything that I do to it would be a little more even. I found when I watch Blender tutorials, when you're watching someone do this step where they're going through and just kind of editing little points and stuff and kind of just doing it point by point, it can be kind of infuriating, because there's something that you want them to edit, or there's something that you notice that you're like, oh, come on, edit that little thing over there, please. But it's just kind of a matter of just kind of hopping around and getting the shape as accurate as you can. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and leave object mode or edit mode and hide the face shell. And so there you go. Got a pretty neat little peanut-headed Spider-Man thing going there already. Because I mean, that's the thing, is he really does not, the human head, the human skull is not, I mean, if you look at mine right now, it's not a perfect sphere on top. It has like sort of an arch like on the back here where the top of your cranium is, and then it kind of slopes down, and then it kind of, your face kind of bulges out of the shape of your head. And that's a big part of why you need a facial in the first place, is that the head itself has such a weird shape that, you know, because you've seen Spider-Man costumes where a person just wears a Spider-Man mask over their head, it looks so weird, and the lenses are really, really weird, the way they go across the eyes. They have to, you know, curve really quick, and they're usually just flexible material, and so that really like has a strange look. And so that's why for every movie they've done face shell, because the human head under spandex just looks ridiculous, honestly. So you have to have these sort of alien shaped heads that, I mean, really, I mean, that's the best way to describe it. I mean, this is very alien. Oh, another exciting thing for those of you that are interested in buying these, if you notice, I've gone beyond what, you know, where the face shell ends. I could still go in and clean it up and edit that out so that, you know, the face shell typically ends around here, back here for the shell. But what another advantage of these 3D printable shells is that potentially I could create the shell so that it's sort of like a Power Ranger helmet, where Power Ranger helmets are like two spherical halves, and they have a hinge at the top and then like two little clamps at the bottom, and that creates a full helmet shape. And so conceivably, if you have a smaller head and you don't like the way that that lip of the face shell ends, it'll be really easy for me to just create a little, you know, expandable back of the head thing. So essentially your face shell will become a full head helmet that will, you know, create a good shape all the way around your head, rather than kind of creating a weird flat part on the back of your head. Okay, so moving on in just general Blender shaping. As you can see here, I've got that mirror modifier there, but not applied, and so I can turn it on and off. We're going to add another modifier, and that is going to be the subdivision surface. And boom, right away you can see that I just made that into a way cleaner, way nicer disco ball. Not nearly as blocky as it was before, but the advantage is if I hit edit mode, I still only have as many points as I had before. So say I grab this point here and I move it hideously, it is editing all of those finer points. I basically just started a Daredevil helmet. But I'm going to undo it because that's not what we're doing here. So that's one of the levels of detail we can add here to just get it looking really nice right away. And the next thing first is we've got it probably set to flat right now. We set it to smooth, and look, it's already gone to a really smooth shape. I think you add the smooth subdivider. I bet someone is out there like, duh, yeah you do. Or maybe, you know what it might be? It might be that you just add subdivisions. Yeah, that's what it is. So the more subdivisions you can see in view here on that subdivider modifier I added, the more subdivisions I add, the more it will bog down my machine, because it's creating just super, super complex shape here. But I mean, that's ultimately what you'd want for a really nice, refined face shell file. I mean, this is basically what the ultimate face shell will look like. This level of smooth accuracy and symmetry. I mean, it's almost going to be too symmetrical. Like, no human head is that symmetrical. Thanks for tuning in, Derek. Derek's tuned off a little bit ago. Thanks all of you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And this is great because I've needed to get this done for a while. So I'm gonna move it down to 3 because I don't need that many subdividers, and then when you go into your wireframe mode, if you have too many, it starts to kind of bog down your view, and you can always add them later, because once again, I'm not actually adding the subdivider now, and I can turn it, I can press this I the same way I can with the middle, and it will hide it temporarily. But it's while I'm working on, oh, and once again, or I don't think I've mentioned this, I'm hitting Z, and that's changing between object mode, or the different wireframe and solid mode, essentially, is what Z does. And so Z and tab are pretty important for editing. So anyway, continuing on with the shape now. So as you can see, I'm basically working on this, refining the shape, and it's going to be a lot easier now because it's working harder to make as smooth a shape as it can. So I can just start editing things. I'm moving the top of the head here because it looks like I was a little far forward, and I've got my proportional editing really powerful so that it's just stretching the whole shape. Or not the whole shape. There we go. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to rotate that, the face shell model, because that's why I've got such an overhang over here, is because it's flat and it matches up with the face shell underneath here, but it doesn't over here. So that means that the symmetry around the side of the head just, it might be off from the middle line a little bit, but it needs to be rotated just so that I kind of meet that distance halfway, for the sake of modeling it. And right now, I know that I'm going to need to probably move the back of the head forward. That's a little bit more like the shape of a person's head. So hide that. All right, that is looking like the top of a head. Kind of looks like just a standard skateboard helmet. If I brought the edge down a little bit, like your standard kind of larger skateboard helmets. And I mean, there's a reason for that, because that's basically the smoothed out shape of the cranium. And so now, go back to my view here. I have that named as sphere. I'm going to go ahead and rename that just by double clicking on the text as face shell. And one thing about Blender, you don't really have like layers and stuff. I mean, there is. I don't know much about it, so sometimes I'll actually name things with like numbers in front of them. I'll name things in kind of number groups, and that keeps them clustered together on this item bar over here, and that makes it a little easier to find them. And so selected that. Looks like the front of it needs to come out. So essentially I'm just at the point now, oops, okay, there we go. I'm at the point now where I'm just editing individual points until I've got a pretty satisfactory. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and rotate this face shell underneath, because it's pretty clear to me that it's kind of tilted to the side a little bit for the sake of this modeling. Actually, at this point, what I need to do is I don't want to tilt it, because I like the shape of the lenses and everything. Yeah, this is good because this helps kind of clean up some of the this is something that exists in the shell currently, and it's not a huge deal breaker. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it is still something that kind of comes up every now and then. So I think actually what I'll do is just move the shell until it's in the middle of both of those. And now you can see the lens is kind of coasting on top of it, which is nice, and the shape is a little more even. And now I should still be able to edit this without it being too drastically different. And this isn't typically too much of a, well, actually it is a problem you'll deal with reference photos, because sometimes reference photos will be at different levels of perspective and orthographic view of the subject you're working on. So you will have issues where it's difficult to line up your reference and your model, but it's kind of unique, the issues I'm having here with lining it up with the photogrammetry model. Okay, so I'm going to select this side vertex again, because it needs to come in now a little bit, now that I've centered it. So I want to do that large edit again. Let's see what that did. Yeah, that's pretty good. That gets it started, but you know, you can tell that there's a little bit more of a bulge out right here. So I'm going to hit that, but I'm also going to turn the proportional editing down. So yeah, and another thing that you might struggle with a little bit is if you're doing this, as you move individual points around, it kind of can disrupt that really smooth shape you get initially from just your larger edits to the shape of the sphere. But that's okay. I mean, you kind of just have to work on it, and there are things you can do to kind of tackle rough areas on an object later. Now it's looking like this maybe needs to come, the whole back probably still needs to come in a little bit. Oh, actually I'll select like here. Yeah, it would help if I had some reference images for like this, the mask on a mannequin head or something, so I had a little more reference about the back of the head shape here, but I do not. Alright, I'm just kind of trying to, the human head is not quite so capped at the top. It kind of has a little slight curvature to the upper back of the head here, so I'm kind of trying to build that into the shape. And once I've basically got all of this arranged, I mean, I could sit here all night arranging all of these vertices just to kind of get this sort of perfect, you know, cohesive mesh between the two shapes. You know, honestly, like probably the ideal thing would be if each and every one of these little squares was just kind of sunk into the shape like that. It looks like probably the forehead just needs to come out further, a little further in general. Oops. So if you hold shift, that's how you're selecting multiple points at once. I'm going to make it a little more, and I'm moving it just on the y-axis by grabbing that little arrow. That's some really basic stuff. So if that's kind of new to you, then you definitely should look into some of the tutorial series out there for Blender that are just so in depth and go into everything. I mean, that's how I basically learned all of this in the last 3 months, just through those really helpful tutorials. I have a little bit of a history with design, like I said earlier, but yeah, Blender, that is one of the main things why I'll advocate Blender use, is that it's free, and there are just so many resources out there for learning to make different things, including files like this. One really quick little neat thing that I've learned, this kind of works a little bit because it's a little bit of a zigzag. If you're moving a point, so to move pretty much anything in Blender, you press G, and that allows you to grab it. And I've got proportional editing on right now, so it's doing its proportional thing. But if you right click, that'll cancel it. And if you hit O, that turns off proportional editing. So once again, I hit G, I'm able to just move it like crazy. If you hit G again, it actually locks it onto the lines that it's connected to. So this is actually insanely helpful for when you're cleaning up a mesh like this. If you've got points, because you want your mesh to ultimately look as much like a disco ball as possible. Like right now, if you look at this shell, it looks like a disco ball. It looks like, if anything, you know, I can tell that, so this strip stays kind of thin and then this one's kind of thick. So if anything, I would want to take all of these and hit grab. So now this is wacky movement, but hit grab again, and now they all slide on that vertice right next to them. And then I can do this guy just to kind of line it up. And so now that really helps later on when you're creating a really nice fleshed out shape. It helps if you've got really, you know, consistently sized boxes, because then it just becomes an easy matter of creating nice shapes out of your lines in order to create smooth shapes ultimately. And so now another important thing is if I want to select like this entire line and be able to move it, you hit Alt and then select the line or the point or the surface or whatever you want to select, and that actually selects the entire line connected to it. If I do it to like the bottom, that allows me to select just with the bottom. And we'll do that in a minute here when it's time to create the rest of the face shell. What I'm going to do really quick though is do what I did before and just move that line of vertices slightly over. You know, it just keeps everything nice and proportional. And what I can see now is maybe this one needs to be slightly moved forward or even back. I might have moved it too far forward. Oops. Okay. So, still just playing, because like I can already tell that, you know, it's nice that I've got my shell as a base here, but it's still really difficult to, I want to turn proportional editing back on, because if you're just editing in single points, sometimes it's hard to get, you know, nice overarching shapes. But yeah, I can already tell that this is going to be still just as difficult as it was to sculpt in the first place, because there are just so many complex curves and shapes that you know kind of spill into each other on this thing. So yeah, I basically could just keep editing that for a while, and I will. But I'll keep moving on here to show you sort of what the next step is if you're designing in Blender. So you go ahead and hold Alt, like I showed you a minute ago, to select an entire ring. And now what you can do is do the extrude feature. And there's controls for it up here in the Tools menu, but I'm just going to press E, because that's the easiest thing to do. It goes all over the place here. If you look at it from one of these views, well, you can hit Z or hit the key for whatever whatever axis you want to lock it on. And so now you can kind of create the next step of vertices. And once again, I'm trying to keep it kind of consistent. Like I want the rows to be an equal distance apart from each other. I don't want them to be too inconsistently spaced. And what I can also do is go back to the scale tool. And kind of play with, I've still got proportional editing on, kind of play with how that looks. And then I think if I just moved it forward in general here, yeah, so that kind of starts to build that shape of the mesh. I'm not, hold on, let me get this kind of out a little bit more. I'm not sure exactly why it gave me that hard crease right there on that edge. Because I know how to make a creased line like that. There's a pretty neat feature called the mean crease feature. So if I've smoothed out a shape like this and I select a line like that, I'm not actually very sure what kind of crease that's going to create. But if you come up here there's this mean crease feature function, and if you just enter like a power of 1, you can kind of play with the strength of it. It will make that specific line, it'll always have a kind of purple line on it to denote that, but what that does is it makes that specific line not smoothed and not, the program's not just jumping over it, essentially. If it was a little more pronounced, you'd be able to see it, so I'm going to go ahead and push it out a little bit more. So you can see that it's kind of got that crease to it, and a hard edge amongst a bunch of smooth edges. So it kind of accidentally did that down here at the bottom, and I'm not exactly sure why it did that or what to do about it. But maybe if I like delete that smoothing multiplier, or it could be the shape of the mesh I added. It could just not be a very good consistent shape. So yeah, that's weird. Well, once again, I'm new to Blender, so that's why we have these fun little learning moments. So I'm going to add that subdivision surface modifier again. Yeah, it still is kind of sticking out. I don't really get that. It might just be because of the nature of the shape. Like it's just kind of, it is too much of a crease. So I basically just have to keep going around and editing it until that kind of smooths out or goes away or something. Yeah, that's weird. Pretty much that's one of those instances where I'm just going to have to sit there and edit it forever until that goes away. It's also going to be kind of an interesting matter of creating this lens. It's kind of something I'm just totally going around right now, but in most tutorials I've seen, they try to build stuff like that into the actual shape of the mesh so that later on it isn't so much of a guessing game. So like you'd actually want to build probably this under lens shape into the shape of the mesh. So basically I would, one way you could do that just right now is you can take your knife tool, and that allows you to just essentially start from one point, go along yeah, knife tool is one of those ones that I'm still not totally fluent on. So yeah, basically just, you probably want more than that, but, and then enter, I think, will typically actually make it happen. And so now if we hide that model, that basically is the start of that lens shape. And probably what we want to do is just like get rid of what's inside here. I missed a couple of vertices. Yeah, ooh, there we go. It begins. Oh, you know what my problem might be? I might have accidentally extruded that thing twice. So something you can do that will sometimes help and clean up things is if you select everything and then remove doubles. Yeah, that did it. See, I had probably another line of extrusion there that I accidentally selected, and so when you select everything and remove doubles, it looks for things like that and is like, oh well, this line of points are all, you know, on the exact same points, so that was an accident obviously, and it just removes all of them, and that got rid of that accidental crease I had there. And really, I mean, it's gotten us going in the ideal shape for the rest of the shell. I mean, gosh, I might just build this whole thing in front of you. So now what I can do is kind of just continue to edit this file. So here's something you can do. You see, this is weird how I've got a corner down here. You might not be able to see it too well, but I've got a corner down here and a point up here. So what you can do is select the one you want to keep first, or just keep track of the order in which you select them. So I selected this one first, and then I hold shift and select this one, if my mouse works. Okay. Well, I think my keyboard is still dying or having trouble communicating. Yeah, I think my keyboard is it. There we go. Okay, so this one was selected first and this one was selected last. So I'm going to merge at last. And what that does is that merges those 2 points, and then ultimately that shape and everything at that point that's either first or last, because you can merge at first, or you can do it at last, or you can merge them at the center, or you can merge them at your 3D cursor, or a lot of options there. But what that does is that kind of starts us on the way to an even nicer shape here. And if you wanted to be really clean with it here, you might even merge those. Or, well, honestly, probably the best thing you do here is grab this and then give it the slide along the vertices treatment, so that you have kind of an equal amount of vertices around the edge, because that's how you're going to start to kind of build the shape inside of the lens. Okay, and so yeah, back to this. Make this model visible again. And now we can kind of separately extrude these pieces. So just hit E here, and they're locked in the middle there, so I can kind of design my own shape here. I'm basically making the corner of the eye for the face shell. And I'm going to move it back a little bit. My proportional editing is still a little too strong. I'm going to move this one out so that it gives it a little more of a domed shape. It might need another set of vertices in the middle there, or these ones might just need to be moved down because it needs to have the ability to be kind of fine-tuned in the middle there. And I'll probably just, actually that's a little sloppy. See, a big part of learning this stuff is learning what's like sloppy and what's not. What is a sloppy solution to a problem, and what is the clean, like, viable solution? I'm going to move that down just so it's a little more on level. All right, looking good. You can just tell. I know this. I think with all the time I've spent on this facial, I could like sculpt it with my eyes closed. So I just know that the temple kind of needs to come out there a little bit more. Hey, I'm excited because I'm a weirdo and I like birds, but hooded orioles. I have hooded orioles that come and come to my feeder, and they just came back from Mexico today. Like today, it's the first day I've seen them. They're gone all winter, but they're really cool birds, like all bright color yellow. Okay, so I'm gonna keep building around the side of the head now. And I think for the sake of building the shape, I'm just gonna ignore the end of the back of the shell. I'm not gonna create this shape of the shell, because I want to make the full head shape in case, like I said earlier, you want to have the shell in like kind of a hinged helmet format, so that it would make a really clean look. Because the other thing about having this thing as an STL file is that it can be printed in any size. It'll be perfectly sized to your head if you if you're willing to adjust for it. Oh shoot, I still have a mean crease right here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Alt and select that line, and I'm going to delete that mean crease. Just hit 0 and get rid of that, because that was just from that demonstration. Okay, so what I do want to do is go ahead and select that ring at the bottom and continue to extrude it downward. Although it's at this point that you want to make sure that like everything's kind of looking nice and clean, because if it isn't, sorry, I'm distracted by those tutorials. They're really loud. They sound like a chainsaw. Okay, if it isn't, or nice and aligned here, when you extrude, you're just going to have to, align it again anyway. So what I've just done there is I moved the 3D cursor to the edge of that line because I want to scale it, but I don't want to scale it from the center. I only want to scale it down towards the front where this 3D cursor is. So what you do is you change this button. This changes how the nature of the rotation and scaling. And so I changed that to 3D cursor, and now anything that happens will be based on the location of the 3D cursor. And so you want to be on the perfectly side view and switch back to scale. And so now I'm growing, I'm changing the size all based from where that 3D cursor is. And once again, you hold shift and you can do a more fine movement. And so what that's doing is it's creating, your head has a bulge up here at the top. It's not like right in the middle of your head shape. It's up at the top, and then it starts to come in, and then the base of your skull is almost on level with your ears. So that curve shape is already coming down by the time your ears happen. So if you look at this file right here, you need to have that curve shape starting, because that's where the ears are right here. So that curve ends already by then. So I'm gonna even curve it a little bit more. All right, and so now I'm gonna make sure to change it back to median point as far as transformation goes, because if you leave it on 3D cursor, that can mess things up for you in the future. I'm going to go ahead and hit, oh wait, I want to be on like a side view here, and hit E, and you can see it's totally free and it can move wherever it wants. I'm actually, I'm going to keep it that way. I don't need to keep it locked going down perfectly. Oh yeah, actually I do, just for the sake of keeping it nice and neat. You press Z and that'll lock it on that Z axis. Okay, so I'm going to do the exact same thing I did with that last one. I'm going to change the origin to the transformation point to the 3D cursor, and that allows me to bend it like that. Alright, so that's really given a nice head shape, although I haven't really been paying attention to the front shape of it, which I need to do. So once again, change it back to median point. You don't want it to be, or actually, I need it to be, I'm going to hit Shift C, which puts the 3D cursor back in the middle. I need it to actually be going from the middle, so I do need it to still be going from the 3D cursor. Yeah, see, really just creating a tapering shape. So I'm going to hit Alt, and that'll allow me to select the whole ring that was above it, because I didn't do this for the above ring either. And if you hold Shift, you get a lot finer control in your movements here. Yeah, I'm really just guesstimating on the back of the head, but I can already tell that it needs to come in a lot more. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to scale it down more and do the same thing to this bottom one. Yeah, it looks more like Spider-Man's head. Okay, I'll go ahead and scale this one just a little bit because it's making kind of a harsh edge now. Sweet, that's a pretty solid start. That could be a like Magneto helmet or something. But I mean, what I just did, what I've done so far in the last hour of this stream, really is just cool, or is key to like a lot of different armors. And I mean, with what I'm doing right now, you could absolutely make a whole Tony Stark suit of armor, Iron Man armor, which I really want to do because I've made Iron Man armor in the past, and I've never had this degree of freedom and control and stuff. So that would be a lot of fun to design like that. And just be a matter of making smooth shapes like this, and then say it's got a creased edge, like say this edge right here is creased because that's like the side of the head. You just come up here to mean crease, add 1, hit enter, and now that should be like a more solid, hard edge. It's not right now because the shape doesn't really allow for it, but you can see that kind of adds that detail. So that comes into, I mean, you could basically model anything with that amount of knowledge in Blender. Well, not really, that's a bit of an overstatement. But here, I'll just keep going. So I've been doing the side of the head, and it actually is all kind of, the sizes are working out pretty well right now. So I'm going to go back to the front now and select those 2 bottommost vertices. Go ahead and press E to extrude, and that middle point is locked because of clipping. I'm not going to make really tall vertices right here because I need a lot of room to do this nose detail here. So I'm actually even going to, okay, here's a good moment. See, I'm working on this point right here, and I want to work on it, but the rotation is all weird. It's really frustrating because all I want to do is work on that point, but every time I rotate, it takes me in a weird place. To fix that, just hit the period on your number pad, and that will always center whatever you have selected as your view. And that was something I struggled with for a long time in Blender. You kind of get into random times where something else is selected as the primary view. All right, and so it's still in, that probably happened because it's still in 3D cursor mode. You always want to have it in median because then it goes back to the easy way to edit the shape. So I'm going to move this back a little bit. And this is actually where this other side comes into play because I can see kind of what the shape of the shell looks like without a lens there. And I base it off of that essentially. So here we go, just kind of cleaning up and moving vertices around to the point that you build the shape essentially of your model. And you're just extruding down and finding points that match what you're modeling here. I'm pretty sure I'm going to need to cut through these vertices and make a couple more points because the shape's starting to get more complex than the 2 vertices I have is allowing. So what I'm probably going to do is kind of use this middle point here in the middle of the mask as a starting point, and I'm going to use my knife tool again. Click on that as the starting point, come down here, and yeah, I think I'm going to do that as the nose essentially, because that gives me the ability to kind of begin the curve of the nose and also kind of have the curve of the nose with a little bit of a bridge right there. And also I need another one to kind of start the shape, like the little valley shape of the flat part of the face right there on the side of the nose. So I'm going to do the knife tool again. I'm going to start up at this point this time and come down And this is bridging very much into sloppy geometry territory, and I know for sure that I'm doing that, but I just don't. I'm still pretty new to all of this, so I'm just not sure what else I should do to get these origins to basically just start in a logical way. And again, you hit G twice, and that forces it to move on its already supplied axis. Actually, you know what probably would make a lot more sense is, so I'm going to go to the line selection here, because I've got that line right there. I'm going to hit delete, and I'm just going to do edges. And so now what I've got here is the opportunity to add another face here. And I guess I'll just do that with the knife tool, because this will just add another layer of kind of fine-tuning the shape of the front of the face shell. Or I might be getting into sloppy down here. I mean, I know for a fact that I do that. I'm still pretty new. Because now it's got this miniature vertex in the front that's probably going to look weird. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I'll end it before it gets up to that middle point. Kind of just more sloppy geometry, but oh well. I'll learn someday what to do there. Alright, well this is an exciting stream, because this is kind of my ultimate goal for the streams, is to have them be like this, where I actually am just working on a project. It's not quite so much of a tutorial as it's just kind of, I'm working on it, and I kind of talk about what I'm doing and what I do. Chris just asked if there's any way to get critiques. Yeah, I know. I definitely do want to be more helpful with your guys' project, but I will admit that I've just always been very bad about looking at other people's projects and work on a consistent basis. You know, I come into Facebook and Instagram every now and then, but a lot of times, you know, I don't tend to really look around a lot at other people's work, which is not great. It's not very collaborative or anything of me, but it's just kind of the way I always have been. So that is kind of a lacking thing. Is like it's not a great way. But you can always there's contact information on my website. I'll try to be better about doing that. I was just thinking today that it might be a lot of fun to do a segment, like a sort of a special day on the show, where so far I've been, you know, just choosing myself what topics to cover based on kind of like what I need to get done and stuff like that. But you know, a lot of times, I mean, obviously you guys want to see the moving lenses stuff done, but other than that, it would be pretty cool to have you guys kind of like request certain things. Like say you were working on like a Black Panther mask or something. Like it'd be fun to have requests, like people come in and ask questions on like how to do certain things, and I could kind of try to give you my input on it, on like what I might do with the project and the direction I would go, and just kind of I could give critiques and stuff like that. That'd be a good way to kind of share work and stuff. Because then, yeah, you could email it to me, and I could, during the stream, I could kind of open it up and look at it, and then that would be very like participatory, and everyone would enjoy that, I think. Okay, just barely starting the shape of the nose here. Not going too crazy with it. Ugh, look how ugly all this looks. See, this is where, you know, you want to stick to a nice disco ball shape. Like back here, it's like a nice disco ball. And then up here, I'm getting into like stained glass window mode. Basically like where you just have random shapes and you piece them together as best as you can to make an object. Like sometimes you have to do that, but if you look at any like professional mesh, you can download meshes and stuff off of Thingiverse and a lot of other websites out there for free. When you look at like a professional mesh, it's crazy. It's like flawless how well lined up all the points and stuff are, because that really just helps the performance of whatever program is loading the mesh or like whatever's printing the mesh or all of that. Okay, I'm gonna keep going back and forth between these two lines here. So time to extrude this. And I'm not going to go that far forward, but I do need to go forward a little bit. This one definitely does need to go forward. Go from the front. Get a 3D cursor in the middle again. And get ready to scale on the 3D cursor. Like I do sometimes. Here we go. And then you hold shift and that gives you a little more control. So I think I want to kind of bring that out more. Oops, wrong side. Same for this one. All right, and yeah, the back of the head, that actually is kind of a logical shape for it to start kind of curving. It might need to come in a little further. So I'll do that really quick. All right, yeah, that is starting to look good. Yeah, see, it's getting messy and sloppy up here in the middle. You can already tell. And somehow, oh, I didn't totally close the geometry here in the face. Merge those, that would solve that. That was basically the sloppiness, but still, it still is getting a little convoluted there in the face. And so, yeah, it's kind of coming along. Just go forward with editing these rings at the bottom here. So get into front view and then continue to extrude outward. Now I'll hit the top of that little nose bump now. And then go ahead and just grab this guy. Do median points again, or yeah. Okie dokie. I don't know why that's not working. Oh, there we go. Actually, I should keep it flat. Yeah, this shape is getting too big and unwieldy. It needs some mesh to break it up in there. Oh wait. What is happening right there? Okay, I see. Okay, yeah, here's what I'll do. So I'm going to undo that extrusion I did. And what I'll do is I'll knife the project right here. Because it's going to be hard to get that shape around the lenses for me because I'm just so new to this that I'm not sure what the best way to get that shape around there will be. So I kind of just have to piece it together. But if you're new, then so will you. So it's useful to see how you kind of struggle past certain points like this. if it does have to be a struggle. So I'm going to go ahead and move that all the way back there to where the point where it's going to be under the lens. And then I'm actually going to move this one over too. These are going to have to be moved over a lot, or edited a lot. And kind of building that shape of the nose. So now if I look at it from the side, and once again, if you hit the period on the number pad, that'll focus on whatever you're working on. So, got to move this all the way back in here. Same goes for this. Ugh. I don't know if you guys can hear that horrible, like, loudspeaker noise in the background, but I don't know what that is. There's an elementary school really close by. I don't know what they'd be doing at 6:30 though. Alright, see how that looks. It's good to just kind of back up every now and then, and oh yeah, that looks great. It's kind of getting that flat shape of the nose. It kind of looks like a, isn't it Iron Fist? Iron Fist kind of has a smooth, capped hat like this. It's pretty funny. Another thing that I have been very bad about this entire time, I blame it on being distracted by the stream. I've been terrible about it. Always, always, always save way more than I have been doing. I'm going to do save as because I have the photogrammetry file open. So I'm going to do a new ASM2 facial and lenses. Yeah, just blend. And then another important thing, I showed you this on Photoshop, is you want to add 1 to the end, or yeah, just add a number to add 1 to the end. And it's even easier in Blender because if you have a number in there like this, if you hit this plus button, it'll automatically save it as 2 or 3. It'll actually add that number up on that number automatically. So if you save it as ASM2 facial and lenses 1, every time you save in the future, all you have to hit is this plus button, and then it'll save it as 2 and leave 1 alone. So that's a good way to get those redundant files backed up, so that if you ever kind of make a mistake or delete something that you can't go far enough back to retrieve, you can open an older save file. Okay, so once again, since I'm going back and forth here, I'm going to select this bottom ring here. Oops. Ugh. It's really bogging my computer down. Everything I'm trying to do to it right now. Oh, you know what it is too? It's that my darn keyboard is dying, and it's also having difficulty communicating with the tower, which is probably why it's dying. And so when I hold shift occasionally, that was caps lock, occasionally when I hold shift, there we go. So that's why, see, it just died while I was holding it. Okay, doesn't matter, I've got the view. Ugh. Yeah, I really hope you guys can't hear that. It's a really annoying loudspeaker noise. Oops, wrong vertices. Undo that. Right there, I just right-clicked to undo an extrude I was doing. I think that's how I ended up making a duplicate extrusion earlier, was by accidentally right-clicking, and you think it's gone, but it's actually just a duplicate sitting there right on top of it. Okay, so go ahead and scale it forward based on that location of the 3D cursor. We're already almost meeting up here, because we could almost meet up on the next row to create the final lens outline shape. It looks a little sloppy with like all the direction that it's going, but I think that'll be cleaned up a lot later anyway. So Go to 1. And I'm going to do that again. And now it's just a matter of moving those points. There we go. Okay, yeah, that looks really good. This point needs to be moved in a little bit. And this one out. And this one out. I mean, this is the game. This is figuring out, you know, your ideal smooth shape is just constantly editing these points back and forth. And eventually it becomes pretty clear to you where the inconsistent shapes are that make, you know, little rough spots. All right, doing well. So it's getting there. So yeah, it looks like on the next, even as soon as the next vertex here, I'm actually gonna move that up so that it kind of gets on level with that. As soon as that next vertex, it'll be able to connect. And you know, there's a little bit of cleanup, like I'd say probably, I'm going to select this face because this is a really long stretched out face and it's kind of getting contorted because of that. So I'm just going to delete the face, and then I'm going to, using the line selection tool, if you hold two separate lines and then hit F, it automatically creates a face between those two lines and seals everything up. So that makes a nicer shape to be edited, and could probably do even close to the same thing down here because it's doing the same thing on this piece. And you can see that the shape of the smoothed out thing is outside of the vertices. That's because of these modifiers, and so you move things around based on what those modifiers are doing. It's more important that they be accurate than the mesh. All right. Okay, so I think I'll do one more row here, and then I'll be at 2 hours. But then I'm going to show you, I've still got some stuff I want to show you because I want to show you what you would do to make it, because as you can see, it's a very paper thin object right now. It's not an actual face shell. So let's say it's time to extrude down. I'm actually going to extrude both at the same time this time. So by holding shift, I was able to select that simultaneously. So view it from the front, do my extrusion here, and it's all clipped. It's doing clipping in the middle. Oh, this is perfect because it's right where the nose is too, and the nose needs a little bit of a bump. Oh, that works out so well. So add it down there, and now what I can do is I could probably just close that shape, although that might be too all of a sudden. Oh, you know what I'll do? Here, this will be perfect. I'm just gonna merge these 2 points. Wait, is that gonna work? No, you know what I'll do? Here, I'll extrude. See, what you can do is you can actually extrude just the point alone. So I'm just extruding a brand new point here, and that's what's gonna get that shape. And without editing or altering these blocks on either side. And so that's gotten in there, and that closed off that little web shape there. So that probably needs to come out a little bit, and then also up. And then this whole ring needs to be edited. It hasn't been scaled or anything. So So I want it to scale probably from right there. Uh-oh. Did I just have a bunch of stuff selected? Yeah, oops. I accidentally selected this inner ring inside of the lens because it's just connected by the nature of how the two work together. So I'm going to use that C selecting tool and use my middle mouse button to deselect all that stuff that I selected just there. There we go. That's a pretty weird little notch to have in the mesh right there, but it does help a lot for the lens and for the nose right here. I can actually clean that shape up pretty well with those two lines right next to each other like that. Oops. So if you do grab twice, moves along that line. All right, already starting to look pretty good. Got some weird stuff poking out up here. Let's see what that is. This? Maybe. Yeah, that's what that was, I think. Oh, it's partly just because it's forcing it to make weird little subdivisions in the geometry. It's getting it though. It's getting the shape. All right, how does that look? All right, so there's a little bit of a bump still at the corner of the eye there that just needs to be cleaned up. Probably from this strange triangle shape it's having to make. Yeah, like that. That's probably doing a majority of that bumping. I mean, this shape that I'm editing right here, I'm very, very familiar with because I deal with it with these shells so frequently. It's really neat to be able to edit it so easily, just moving vertexes around. So there we go. I mean, that's really kind of a great start to how that one, is going to need to look eventually. And, once again, just in a position now where I'll select that whole ring again. Oops. Having some issues selecting here. Okay. But once I've got it extruded down past that, I won't have that issue again. Well, first I want to scale it though. So, scale it in just a little, hold shift to get a smaller amount. And now, it's time to extrude again. And scale that one in too. And then it has to be scaled on the front, over a little bit. And then obviously all these middle points have to be edited. It's going to want to move from a weird spot. All right. Looks like Spider-Man wearing a like a luchadora mask. Funny. Any day now, come on. Oh, I was hitting the wrong button. Was I? What the heck? There we go. Jeez. Sometimes the program just acts weird, or I'm selecting the wrong options, or something like that, but it can be frustrating. Cleaning up the shape here. Yeah, the front of that nose area is going to take a lot of fine tuning, but it's already kind of getting a pretty good shape out of it. And this is actually, it's probably already started a little while ago. This is a good opportunity to get the, okay, my keyboard is just dying here. Get the back of the jaw started here. That's what I was meaning to say. Oops, that was Z. All right, yeah, see, I'm basically just moving these points along, creating the shape of the jaw, like the outline of the shell that I basically have currently. Oops. And once again, I've said this a couple times, but when you hit G twice, just making sure that the points are sliding along on the line so that it's, you know, moving along the surface of the mesh, not just flat with your perspective. All right. Oh yeah, and then now what I can do is also move these in a little bit. There, yeah, and that starts to make the face shell shape you can see out there. And once again, that's because you don't want just a hard edge to your face shell where it ends. You want it to kind of round over the edge. That way the spandex rounds and then goes over the edge. It doesn't just create, like, you know, a corner, a really harsh line where the spandex goes over the edge. So just clean up at this point. Well, I mean, after I've done the jaw. That's actually kind of interesting because I almost mentioned it earlier, I think, was that these 3D files, I'm definitely aiming to have a mobile jaw. Like maybe not like a lot of movement, but a little bit of movement out of the jaw so that it, you know, kind of does a more natural human talking shape than just solid, stiff jaw stuff. Alright. Yeah, and this is all just very, very much like finesse, fine-tuning here. I hide the face shell and leave edit mode. can see that it's really, you know, it's starting to turn into the shape of that face shell. See, you can also see that forehead bump, that ripple, that came from when I added that weird geometry up the middle of the forehead. So I'm already regretting having done that. Maybe I should just go in and delete that before it messes too much up. But it just has to struggle to create good subdivisions around all that information that I added there. So pretty much the last thing I want to talk about is once you've gotten your shell like pretty much done, I don't think I'm going to go all the way to the finish with like the bottom of the jaw and everything. But once you've got your shell all the way done, there's a last modifier you add, which is solidify. And what solidify does is, you can see here that it actually adds a slight thickness to the material based on what you enter here. I'm really thickening it up here, but you know, that's how you get the face shell to have actual structure to it. You know, until you do this part, we're just working on a flat nothing of a shape, but now it actually has depth and thickness to it. And that's how you do any like armor piece or anything like that. So now I could 3D print this. I could totally go throw this in my printer right now. It'd have some issues with probably the support underneath. Like it might have an issue building the roof of this dome without some kind of support underneath. But it actually might be able to do it successfully because it's enough of a curved up shape. And also, I haven't messed with scale at all. I haven't scaled this or really gotten it to scale in any way. But yeah, so like if I've just finished a model that I really like, I would let me save before you go ahead and apply all of your modifiers and everything. Go ahead and save so that you're not, you know, if anything goes wrong or if anything goes weird, it's easy enough for you to just go back and open that last save file you had. So apply that modifier. Maybe turn my subdivider smooth up to 4. Apply that. Apply my thickness modifier. And then the next step for 3D printing is to go up, and you're not saving, you're exporting as STL. And it'll basically just give you the save file name as STL. And so I'm going to do test, just so that I'm able to figure out what it is later on. So you export your STL by that. It might take a second, or just not respond in general. Oh, I didn't delete the head. When you're exporting an STL, I'm gonna have to go in and do this really quick. I accidentally left in this previous Spider-Man head, and that's gonna still be a part of the STL. The STL file, the reason you use STL files for 3D printing is because an STL file is just a very direct, you know, here is the information of the mesh type file, and it doesn't like hide things or anything like that. So if that's hidden on your file, it'll show up. And I'm even gonna delete these like lamps and planes and things like that. And so all I'm left with is this face shell. File, export STL here, and I'm just going to click that last one that I had and go over it because that one has a lot of unnecessary information. Okay, and so it's right here. It already is a Cura file, and Cura is the program that I use to rip STL files into the G code necessary for 3D printing. It's really easy and not too difficult to get a handle on it. Ooh, it's super tiny. There it is. There's a face shell. All in the amount of time. I'd be wanting to go out and get my printer heated up right now. You know, something I've realized, usually it's about 1,000% bigger in Cura than it is in Blender. And even that's small. Yeah, why not? I'll print it big like this. That's cool. I mean, that's basically a 3D model of Spider-Man. Not only is it just a face shell, I mean, it's an actual 3D model of Spider-Man. So if you wanted to do that too, um, that's part of why I want to, I've got that mini shell I showed you guys earlier that I've already 3D printed. It would be pretty cool to make an actual maquette, like a Hot Toys, like high detail maquette that you could actually print a miniature face shell and lenses for, and then actually dye sublimate a little miniature suit for, and maybe even puff paint a little miniature suit, and then you'd have a really cool like figure. If you had the face shell and lenses and mask on a display, you could actually have a full size figure next to it. So maybe I'll create like a base Spider-Man like maquette, and then you could print little mini face shells and mini patterns for them, and then just print a bunch of the maquettes. Okay, great. So, I mean, basically, you can see down here it says it's going to take about two hours. You can go to a different view here where you actually see the layers that it's going to print in. And right now, it's actually, I'm moving down through all the layers that it calculates of what it's going to print. There's something it's going to struggle a lot with. It's going to struggle a lot with that. Just the shape of this open lens, like creating this. I found that when you have two individual parts, like the front of this forehead and the side of this temple coming together, like this, they don't meet up until the very top, and then by then, you just have to hope that they're pretty close together, and so it can actually kind of create a pretty rough, nasty look to it. So, it's going to be, ultimately, when people print the full-size versions of these, they're going to be split into multiple pieces. It's going to be a bunch of different, it's probably going to be split down the middle, and then I think probably into thirds. So 6 different pieces just for the face shell alone, and then the lenses on top of that. But because of that, I think that the moving jaw is going to be really easy to do. But yeah, it'll probably just be, and then each one will be optimized for printing, in a home 3D printer like this. Because I can print like 20 centimeters square on mine, which is pretty big. That's a pretty decent size. So that's pretty standard for those home consumer printers. But yeah, so I think that was a pretty good stream. It kind of just went through the entire process of making, you start in Blender and you start your shape. If you didn't have an object to go off of like I did, you just start with reference photos from the movie. And I should have had reference photos open because I was kind of going a little too close off of my model, which I think is just an example of getting too close to the work. And so I should have had some reference photos to look at so that I was able to kind of, if there's any part that's random and I'm not sure what needs to happen, I can look at the reference photo and have that to go off of. Sean just asked if the files are going to be only on Shapeways or if they're going to be available as individual STL files. Yes, I do think that they are going to be both. For the people that don't have a 3D printer, you'll be able to go to Shapeways. If you actually go to Shapeways right now, Spidey Planet sells their face shell pretty much exactly the way I want to right now. They sell a $350 from the old Sam Raimi movies face shell that you buy, and Shapeways manufactures it and ships it to you. And they handle all of that manufacturing and stuff for you, and then it's just a matter of kind of the design and everything for the seller. And so I want to have both that, have the Shapeways store where I'll sell a file very similar to what I've just created in front of you guys, and then also I'll just sell the file itself, like the optimized file. I'm not sure on prices yet. Like I want to make sure that I'm being compensated for the amount of work that goes into like designing and everything like that. So I'm thinking it might be kind of similar to the prices for my my TIFF files and stuff, because it's still if you're 3D printing a file and it costs like anywhere from $30 to $50 for the file, it's still, and then maximum $20 for the filament material, that's still a quarter of how much I charge currently for a full face shell with all how much time and effort it takes to make them. And I still am not, I'm still charging too little for how long it takes to make them too. So yeah, so I'll work out a price that is fair, that is like, I'm thinking somewhere around probably the files for my TIFF files, so that I can start making these face shell files, and you can either get them from Shapeways, which will have a little bit more of an expense because you'll be paying for the materials and everything from Shapeways, but you don't have to have a 3D printer. And also the good thing about getting it from Shapeways is it won't be printed in multiple parts. It'll probably be printed in just one big shell because they have the printers capable of, printing something like that. The Robot Slayer keeps asking if he can make a face shell by pouring molten iron on his face. Yes, you probably could make a face shell by pouring molten iron on your face, but you'd be dead if you wanted to use it. I mean, that's basically the process of making a mold. A little bit later, later on in these series of streams, I'm going to go through the process of making a head bust, which basically is a plaster bust of your head, which is like an exact representation, which is how I actually make these shells. I sculpt these shells on top of a head bust with clay and stuff, and that gives you a lot more control. It's a much more intuitive way to make things. And so I'll actually be doing tutorials on how to make that plaster head bust, and then you could pour all the molten iron on that you want, and wouldn't have to worry about it at all. Anyway, yeah, cool. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll probably go ahead and print this little face shell that we designed. So, I'll post some pictures of that when it's done later tonight or tomorrow. So cool. And tune in for the stream on Thursday, and again on the weekend. We'll do some more cool stuff moving towards the Marvel MCU moving lenses. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and it's been a lot of fun. Bye.